As we think about the elements that might need to be improved with sports wagering, I think we need to keep in mind that we're really in the early days of this industry here in the United States, and we're all doing things differently than we have in the past. That's true for the operator, it's true for the player, and it's also true for the regulator. So we're all continuing down the learning curve together, and we have to pay attention to issues as they arise. We need, as regulators, to be paying attention to technical issues to make sure that the sports books are functioning as they're intended to function. And we need to pay attention to player complaints to make sure that they're being adequately resolved and that things like promotions are clear and transparent to the player so that they understand what they're signing up for. And I think we also need to be particularly mindful of protections for the vulnerable. We need to be being careful that ads aren't being targeted at kids and that players who want to control their gambling have tools available to them, whether they're spend limits or wagering limits or self-exclusion lists. We need to make sure that protections for the vulnerable are in place. So I think as we continue down this learning curve, new issues will present themselves, and we all just need to be on our toes and recognize that we are in the early days of this industry and we don't always know what we don't know, but we just have to pay attention for what presents itself.
So I think what we're seeing in terms of regulations that may need to be tightened is specific to the accounting systems for these sports wagering systems. And so it's become very evident that the accounting systems for online sports systems are much further behind than what a number of regulators are seeing in the slot accounting systems. The systems do not have that immediate access to the accounting systems. The regulators have different types of access. We're seeing many different types of accounting systems. And I don't think it's practical for regulators to expect or demand one accounting system. But I do think it's important for the industry to settle on what are some reasonable standards in accounting systems with respect to what columns are reported, where those accounting systems pull from, and what access regulators might have. And so at this point, we've had to be very creative in terms of how we audit revenue. In Iowa, we have almost 12 different online sports companies, and there'll be another dozen that should be launching here in the next few months. And so I think with respect to what could be improved, that would be one for us that I would like to see. And specifically how that could be done is if maybe the industry could be part of that process. I think as regulators, we're not picky. I think we would be comfortable with a standard type of reporting platform or our guidelines. But I think if one thing would be is if the industry could develop some standards for accounting systems, and I think that may be something that the various jurisdictions could adopt.
I think there's a couple areas that we're really focused on now in New Jersey. The first is clearly our challenges in competing against the illegal offshore markets. I think we're making inroads in that area, but those are still very viable companies, skilled in what they do, and certainly readily accessible through access points throughout the country. They have total access to every state in the United States to engage in illegal activity. So that's a big challenge as we roll out and as the states that become legal join together and find out better ways to combat the illegal market offshore. As we all know in business in the United States, there are entrepreneurs who always seem to be looking for an opportunity to press the envelope in taking sports wagering to a level of challenging the regulatory structure. And what I mean by that is, in the United States, we've always had this great debate in games of chance, whether it's a skill game or a chance game. And you're seeing more and more challenges by entrepreneurs looking to take traditional games of chance and argue that they're games of skill and therefore should not be regulated as a gambling activity. So the consequences of that for the regulated community are how do you protect the vulnerable? are ensuring consumer protections are in place for people who play those games, and selfishly, how's it taxed and what revenue is generated from it to benefit the jurisdictions that at the end of the day have to deal with the consequences of people who struggle and are addicted to problems associated with those offerings. Again, we've also raised awareness to our media outlets. They've done a great job since in shying away from advertising on illegal gaming sites. They're getting more and more involved in responsible gaming initiatives, and certainly more and more involved in consumer protection and protecting those who are vulnerable to the ills of gambling. And lastly, every day it seems like our payment processing issue becomes more and more a non-issue. We've had great luck with the entities we've worked with in expanding to the legal market. We still do not allow any funding of such as Bitcoin or anything that's not recognized by the United States Treasury. However, the opportunities to use legitimate funding sources to support the investment that you have into these gambling activities is less and less a challenge than it was certainly 3 years ago.
We only offer professional and collegiate sports, and we tried to keep it simple. We kept it at the FBC, I believe, and the MLB and things like that. But in the South, with the real push for collegiate sports, we met with the three major schools' athletic directors, and they had a request to not allow prop betting on individuals in the sport, like the quarterback or the punter or something like that. So we agreed that wasn't a big money deal, and we left the meeting. They were happy and we were happy, and they're always welcome to send their concerns to us. But since then, we've started opening up a little bit, not on the prop bets, but just taking more bets now, different types of bets than we did in its infancy. So I think we've matured as a regulatory body. The market's matured. The operators are monitoring it very well, what's a legal bet and what's not a legal bet. So I can foresee us loosening up just a little bit more as the years to come.